Café Anyway. Mm-hmm. What are we doing here?
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Yes, this is one of those podcasts that broadcasts from a cafe called Café Anyway, somewhere in Podcastro Valley.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
I'm Mike Matthews. I got some stuff to bring you today, and we'll stop by and say hi to some characters that you will meet, and you won't be able to wait to say goodbye, because it will be Madame Rootabega, Valentino, and ICB, Bison Bentley. He'll be stopping by too. We'll have a fun
Mike's Daily Podcast.
laugh or two. I've been up a long time today. I thought, I'm not going to do a podcast, but I did one.
Mike's
because the show is called
Daily
Mike's Daily Podcast,
Podcast.
and I felt that I owed it to you.
Yeah.
I actually haven't done one since Sunday. But Sunday's podcast was probably the longest one I've ever done. It was almost an hour. I had a lot of material to get to. I had a lot of things to say. But, you know, in the process of not being able to bring you a podcast, this week, being so busy with so many things happening at work, it's been a plethora, a cornucopia of activities. And then, I'm not going to blame it all on work. I've also had a bunch of stuff going on at home. My lovely lady friend and I wanted to do some things once I got off of work, do some fun little activities, you know, like walking around the neighborhood and talking to neighbors, talking to the community, meeting nice people that live down the street, and are also having to put up with the sounds of the roaring chainsaws going all day and night. Well, not all night, mostly all day. Cutting down the plethora of eucalyptus trees that fell over and caused all kinds of problems and havoc back in January and February this year. They're trying to preemptively strike these trees.
And here's today's podcast picture.
It is not of eucalyptus trees, but of a beautiful sunset, not in Podcastro Valley, but in Pleasanton. And it was a really cool sunset. This was recently, maybe a month ago. And there was a very bizarre sky, kind of stormy. We had some rain that week. And so, see that picture. It's very cool. MikesDailyPodcast.com. And I have a really nice sunset picture. Oh, the very bizarre picture of patches. It's just a gallery of amazing things. See it at MikesDailyPodcast.com. So, yes, the late, great Basil the Boxer, his name came up today in a conversation. My lovely lady friend was talking to some neighbors down the street, and the conversation turned to Basil. And actually a bizarre episode that happened years ago when I was still married. And I was walking Basil, and he saw a boxer by the name of Duke. The late, great Basil, the boxer, and the late, great Duke. They duked it out. Now, Duke was not on a leash. And so Basil sees Duke. Duke comes over and gets all aggressive, and they're all like immediately fighting. And here's what you do when there's a dog fight and you have a leash. Use the leash to pull the dog back. Don't reach your hand down and try and grab their collar. No.
The Fascinating Material Project.
FM Project.
This is my opinion, and I learned it firsthand because one of the dogs bit my hand. Unfortunately, it was my own dog that bit my hand. And, well, I had a big old hole in my hand, and it was my right hand, and I'm right-handed. So I was scared. I was freaking out. I rush home. I'm bleeding like crazy. I'm sticking my hand under the water. My then wife sees this, and she said, "What happened?" I go, this dog was loose, and it went for Basil, and they fought, and my hand got bit, and because I put my hand, and she walks out the door. I told her what house it was, and she talked to the guy.
You will travel into the incredible universe.
Well, guess what? I heard the other side. I talked I did not talk to the guy, but my lovely lady friend did. And he said, oh, yeah, she still remembers that day that my ex-wife went after him. He goes, wow, I thought she may have had a shiv or something. So, yes, it was a frightening day for all of us. My hand was bleeding, a frightening day for him. Thankfully, my hand healed. Thankfully. I remember one of my ex-wife's uncles who was in the medical industry saw my hand and said, yeah, I'm a little bit worried. And that wasn't good. I'm worried about your nerves in your hand and all that. So, but it did heal. And I learned a valuable lesson, which I then did not put into effect because I got bit again by Basil. Years later, a good friend of mine, his dog, when you hear that thing, Welsh on the World, that's in reference, that's a little thing I sometimes play on my podcast. That's in reference to a guy I know named Owen Welsh. His dog once got into a fight with Basil because they were eating food, or Basil was eating food and his dog came along to try and have some, and Basil, starts getting into a brawl and neither one's backing down. Both dogs are going at it. So I, once again, instinctively grab go for his collar, and I got bit by, this time, his dog bit me and left a scar I still have to this day on my right hand. Once again, my right hand, because that's the hand that instinctively goes for the collar, and bit one of my fingers. I still have a scar on the finger, but now I've got a bunch of wrinkles on my hands because I'm in my 50s, so I don't really see the scar anymore because the wrinkles cover it up. Thank you, Wrinkles.
And now we return you to our regularly scheduled program with Mike Matthews.
Ginormous.
If you have a leash on them, if you don't have a leash, maybe just let them go until they stop. I don't know look it up. That's something to look up. I'm not going to look it up now because I'm doing a podcast and I want to celebrate the fact that today is American Business Women's Day. Oh, no, wait. That's the 22nd. If you're listening to this on September 22nd, the hardworking women of the world, woo! They work so hard. They're doing all kinds of work. There was a time when we used to say, as we go outside a Café Anyway, where we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast, somewhere in Podcast Valley. Anyway. Café Anyway. That's right. The man always says anyway. Café Anyway. There was a time when we used to say that behind every great man, there had to be a great woman. But in these times of change, that's no longer true. So we're coming out of the kitchen because there's something we forgot to say to you. We say sisters are doing it for themselves, standing on their own 2 feet and ringing on their own bells. Sisters are doing it for themselves. Aretha Franklin and the Eurythmics. That's right. That's who did that song. Who actually wrote that song is what I want to know. It must have been Annie Lennox. It's from the Be Yourself Tonight album.
A fine article.
You silly, great, fat article.
I think, because, you had, before that, you had the, Would I Lie to You? Oh, that was on this album. Okay. 1985. Wow. That's is a ways back there. So, yeah, Aretha Franklin sang on that. It was written by Annie Lennox and David A. Stewart, who composed the Eurythmics. Wow. I just have to say I'm a huge fan of
Mike's Matthewsman Park.
The front panel will close automatically. Please remain seated at all times.
It's like, hey, why am I thinking Tom Petty? Because you've got the guys from the Heartbreakers, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. You've got Benmont Tench on the organ, which is interesting because David A. Stewart was an accomplished keyboardist, did the cool sounds for the Sweet Dreams Are Made of This, the synthesizer sounds. He was just a whiz with all that stuff and all the other songs they did with plenty of synthesizers. But they wanted this different sound. In fact, David A. Stewart was behind Tom Petty's Don't Come Around Here No More. And there's a whole interesting story I mentioned on a recent podcast about how Stevie Nicks figures into so many songs from the 80s and the 70s. And there was that song, 'Cause you are a magnet and I am steel. That guy wrote that song for Stevie, and she sings on it. You had Don't Come Around Here No More, which I think was written by David A. Stewart, about how Stevie was knocking on Tom Petty's door because I think she had a thing for David A. Stewart. I forget that exactly was the story. I think Joe Walsh had something to do with all of this. But Ben Montench I met, he got into country music for a while. He had a quasi-hit song with something, That's How a Heart Breaks, or Nothing Breaks Like a Heart. That's a great song by Miley Cyrus. But Ben Montench, very nice guy. And Mike Campbell, of course, who wrote Boys of Summer for Don Henley. Mike Campbell, and also in the Heartbreakers, is on lead guitar. So that's where that sound comes from. And it was from 1985 when the Heartbreakers and Tom Petty and Eurythmics were all huge, and Stevie Nicks at that time. So if your dog does get into a fight, what they suggest you should do, according to petmag.com and thesprucepets.com, make loud noises such as clanging, pots together, or trash can lids, or something loud to distract the dogs. Put an object between them that's not your hand, such as a chair or a broom, to separate them. Pull them apart, but be careful not to get bitten, which yours truly did. Spray them with water to distract them. Throw a heavy blanket over the fighting dogs to momentarily break their focus and help end the fight. This may also give you a chance to more safely separate the dogs. Very smart. So if you're listening to this on the 22nd, it is also National Ice Cream Cone Day. Oh, come on. I guess we should be thankful for ice cream cones, because without them, you wouldn't have the instrument that you can later eat that holds the ice cream. National Online Recovery Day. That makes no sense. What? Maybe that's getting away from being online? Ah, I see. Okay, taking time off from being online. Because we are. If you're listening to this podcast, you're theoretically online, because that's where you're getting this podcast from a server somewhere that I've uploaded the podcast to. So yes, once you're done listening to this, turn off all internet and get away from being online. And it is also National Brave Day. I want to see you be brave, said the lady that sang that other song that I can't. Sarah Bareilles. Thank you. Okay. If you are listening to this on the 23rd, that we should look forward to. Oh, isn't it the first day of fall?
Magnification.
No. Yes, it's the autumnal equinox. Equal day, equal night is the 23rd. As well as National Checkers Day and Dogs in Politics Day. I'm not making this up. I don't think I even could make this up. Dogs? Are there dogs in politics? Checkers is not my favorite. It's fun once in a great while, if you're out in the great outdoors like we are right now.
Magnification.
And National Singles Day. Not sure how. I thought that was like when they celebrate Singles Day in, is it China? Alibaba Singles Day, and that ends up being like a what do you call it? Like Black Friday with Amazon. So that, but I think that's November 1111 or something like that. But it is going to be the 23rd, September 23rd of 2023. And that's going to be interesting if you're listening to us on that day. But hey, it is the autumnal equinox, so that's awesome.
Magnification.
All right, outside of Café Anyway, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth, look who is here. Hello, my gosh, it's Madame Rootabega, and I love ice cream cones. Ooh. Do you like ice cream? Yes. Do you like yogurt? Yes. Do you like gelato? No. What? Gelato? It's wonderful. There's all kinds of flavors, and it's Italian, and it's... The word itself is just magnificent. Look who else is here.
Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the parking attendant.
And this is Bison Bentley.
Mike, something's going on with Bison Bentley's throat there.
Yeah, my throat. Do you know that? Oh, he can't say, do you know that? I'm sorry, Bison Bentley. I hope you get over that. Yeah, me too. Do you know that? Oh, hey, it's back. Excellent. It's been a busy week. We finished watching on BritBox Lewis. We got all into first we watched Endeavor, and that's all about Inspector Morse, but his younger days. In fact, I think the final season is currently on PBS. Then we saw what the original Inspector Morse was, which started in the 80s. We saw like one episode, but we didn't really get into it. But there was the assistant to Inspector Morse named Sergeant Lewis, I think. Years later, he becomes an inspector. I mean, years later. I mean, like 30 years later, in the late 2000s, he has his own show just called Lewis. And that's fun because there's this guy, the actor Lawrence Fox. He's married to Billie Piper, who was Rose on Doctor Who when they rebooted it. She's the blonde. So she's married to Lawrence Fox. Lawrence Fox apparently has some very strong conservative views in England. He actually ran for mayor of London and lost. But yeah, he's got some very strong sort of Trumpian views. And they, well, he's an amazing actor, Lawrence. And he does a great job playing this guy Hathaway, Sergeant Hathaway. And he's on the whole time, the entire run of the show. I think it lasted almost 9 years. And it was just a fun show to watch. It ended sometime, I think, in 2015, 16, something like that. So we watched that. We finished that up. Now we're looking for another show. We're going to just probably get away from all things British and go to the American side of things, watch some Jack Ryan, and see the John Krasinski thing. That actor, that guy, impossible to not like him. He just seems like a likable, charming guy. But his face, when he talks, I sometimes think, is that a real person or is that CGI? He almost looks like one of those CGI cartoon characters that they do for these modern day cartoons, the CGI cartoons. His facial expression, maybe they just modeled every CGI character on him and his facial expressions, how he moves his face around. I don't know. Café Anyway. It's been a 12-hour day for me as far as work goes. And this morning I was producing Rob Black's podcast. I threw some sound effects on his show. Always makes him laugh. And he covered some interesting topics. Today you probably heard that Rupert Murdoch is stepping down. His son is it Loudon? Lachlan is his son's name.
Hey, Lachlan, get over here and take over my company while I leave, because I'm Rupert Murdoch.
And that was my attempt. So that happened today. Very interesting thing. Rob, so I produce his podcast. I don't typically do his radio show, but I got to do that today, but that requires me getting up really early and having a really long day. And I'm a manager, so all day long I'm being asked questions and stuff is thrown at me email-wise, calling people back. It's best to, if you get an email that you can't figure out for the life of you, can't make heads or tails, just call the person back. And if you can't get a hold of them, call someone that knows them who can get a hold of them. Get them on the phone, because just email, so much gets lost in the email world, in the email communication world. Speaking of all that and texting and whatnot, Apple recently unveiled their new iPhone, and iPhones account for more than half of Apple's revenue. People love their iPhones. A quarter of the iPhone install base, some 1.2 billion units, is at least 4 years old. So most of the iPhones out there are old. Well, a quarter of them. There are emerging risks to Apple in China. The new Huawei Mate 6040 Pro smartphone appears to be taking share from Apple in China. Speaking of apples, I have so many apples in my backyard. Every time I go out in my backyard, oh my gosh, there's 50 more apples that have fallen down from the tree I need to pick up. And ooh, that one's got half of it is brown and decomposed and was eaten by an animal. So I'm going to throw that in the compost pile. The most notable change in the iPhone 15, they're up to the 15, is likely to be a shift to be the more widely used USB-C standard.
Mike's out of left field recordings.
Recording everything captures actions that will never again be repeated.
The dynamic island feature is expected on all models this year. The Pro Max gets a new periscope camera that improves optical zoom on the iPhone's camera, and the Apple Watch is expected to get a new processor with an improved performance and a longer battery life. AirPods are expected to be updated to support the USB-C charging. I haven't used any of these. I think my Samsung does not use the USB-C, or maybe it does. I'm not so sure. But that is what is planned. Oh, by the way, McDonald's is planning to transition away from self-serve beverage stations in the U.S. You won't be able to drink as much Diet Coke or Dr. Pepper or whatever your poison is in about 10 years. Yes, 2032, they're going to end it. And the cost of using an out-of-network ATM now, if I need to get money. Oh, my bank, I don't see any ATMs for my bank. Okay, I'll just use this other one. $4.73. Bam. That's a record high. That's how much you're going to get charged. Bam. Okay. Oh, and one last thing. The number of millionaires last year rose to 59.4 million. That's confusing. 59.4 million millionaires. The number of how many millionaires there are worldwide is expected to reach 86 million by 2027. So here you go. Good luck. You got a chance. Maybe you are one. Congratulations. Okay. That's pretty much it for it. Everything I got in my brain. So, Mike, it says, try Bard, an AI experiment by Google. We're excited to introduce local guides to Bard, an AI experiment by Google. Think of Bard as your creative and helpful collaborator. Here to boost your productivity, accelerate your ideas, and fuel your curiosity. I have not tried it yet. It is under development, it says here. It's improving every day with feedback from helpful users like you. Bard is now available in over 40 new languages, including Arabic, Chinese, simplified and traditional, German, Hindi, Spanish, and more. We've also expanded access to more places, including all 27 countries in the European Union and Brazil. Okay, well, maybe I'll give it a spin and let you know what I think of it next podcast. But I have been using a little bit of the Bing AI. I guess that is the generative AI or chat GBT or something. But yes, we'll see how it goes. Next show, it'll be the wonderful Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, and John Deere the engineer. If you've tried any of those things, the Apple stuff, the Bard stuff, anything else you want to share, 510-228-4640, and more ways to reach me now, given to you by A-Frame.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at MikesDailyPodcast.com.
Email Mike now at MikesDailyPodcast@gmail.com.
See you tomorrow. Bye.
That's right, mate. And that was FM episode 2677. You can catch all the others at MikesDailyPodcast.com.